But I think everyone in this band and people who have been and gone, so to speak, have passed through.
Mick Fleetwood's story starts long before the fame, the heartbreak, or the cocaine-fueled chaos that would one day define Fleetwood Mac. It begins in the quiet town of Rodruth, Cornwall, England, where he was born on June 24, 1947. Mick's father was a Royal Air Force officer, which meant the family moved constantly, Egypt, Norway, and different parts of England. Those early years shaped Mick in ways that would stay with him forever. In Egypt, he was surrounded by the sound of street drums, layered rhythms, and voices echoing in the desert air. Without realizing it, he was learning how rhythm could tell stories. Later in Norway, he discovered silence, long winters, dark skies, and endless snow. That silence gave him patience, the kind every great drummer needs. School was never easy. Mick had severe dyslexia, and back then teachers didn't understand it. He failed most exams even though he was bright and curious. He once said that reading was like trying to catch birds with your bare hands. You could see the words, but they wouldn't stay still. What saved him was rhythm. When he was 13, his parents gave him his first drum kit. It was small and cheap, but to Mick, it felt like a doorway opening. He locked himself in the attic for hours, playing along to Everly Brothers and Cliff Richard records. He didn't know the rules, so he made his own. That raw, instinctive style would later become his trademark. By 15, school was over for him. He dropped out and told his family he was going to London to be a drummer. To his surprise, they supported him completely. His parents believed in his talent. His sister Sally, an actress, gave him a floor to sleep on in her Notting Hill flat. He didn't have much, just his drum kit, a second-hand taxi he used as a van, and a stubborn belief that music was where he belonged. Within a year, that belief started paying off. A local musician named Peter Bardens heard him play and invited him to join his band. They began performing around London, even opening for acts like the Rolling Stones and the Yardbirds. It was the early 1960s, a golden age for British rock, and Mick was right in the middle of it. Over the next few years, Mick played with different bands, learning every night. He wasn't just keeping the beat, he was studying people, stage energy, and how music could control emotion. His big break came when he joined John Mayall's Bluesbreakers in 1967. That band was like a university for blues musicians. Everyone who passed through it, Eric Clapton, Peter Green, John McVie, went on to make history. But Mick's time there didn't last. His drinking got out of control, and Mayall eventually fired him. It was a painful lesson, but it set up something bigger. A few months later, Peter Green called him back for a small studio session. Green, McVie, and Fleetwood recorded a handful of blues songs. One of them was an instrumental track that Green named Fleetwood Mac, almost as an afterthought. None of them realized it would become the name of a band that would define generations. By 1967, Fleetwood Mac was born. At first, they were a simple blues group. Green led the music, McVie held the bass, and Fleetwood provided the backbone with his steady drumming. Their first record, Peter Green's Fleetwood Mac, it's an unexpected hit in the UK. It didn't have a big single or radio push, but word spread. People loved the authenticity, the raw sound, and the soul in Green's guitar. For a while, everything looked perfect. They were playing huge shows, making good money, and gaining respect from other artists. Even the Beatles noticed them. But fame never sat comfortably with Peter Green. During a 1970 tour in Germany, he took LSD at a party that changed him forever. Friends said he came back paranoid and obsessed with the idea that money was evil. Soon after, he left the band completely. It was heartbreaking. Green was their creative heart, and suddenly he was gone. Mick later said it felt like losing a brother. Still, Fleetwood refused to give up. He believed the band could evolve. When Christine Perfect, who had recently married John McVie, joined, she brought something new: melody, warmth, and emotional depth. Her voice softened their blues roots and made the songs more accessible. The band started moving from pure blues into rock and pop territory. But the next few years were messy. Members came and went, relationships tangled, and money troubles grew. Mick himself struggled with drinking. Yet he kept the band alive, determined that the dream wouldn't die. Then, 1974, something unexpected happened that would change music forever. Mick was scouting new studios in Los Angeles when he met an American duo, Lindsey Buckingham and Stevie Nicks. They were struggling, broke, and almost ready to quit music. But when Mick heard their demo, he knew instantly there was magic. He invited them to join Fleetwood Mac. That single decision turned an aging blues group into one of the greatest rock bands of all time. The chemistry was electric. Buckingham's perfectionism, Nicks's haunting lyrics, Christine's grace, and the rock-solid rhythm of Fleetwood and Mick Fleetwood behind it all. By 1975, their self-titled album Fleetwood Mac was climbing the charts, setting the stage for what was to come: fame, fortune, and complete chaos. By 1976, Fleetwood Mac was one of the biggest bands in the world and one of the most dysfunctional. Behind the glamour and gold records, everything was falling apart. John and Christine McVie's marriage was ending. Lindsey Buckingham and Stevie Nicks had broken up, but were still forced to sing love songs together on stage. And Mick Fleetwood had just discovered that his own wife, Jenny Boyd, was having an affair with one of the band's guitarists. The studio became a battlefield filled with cocaine, heartbreak, and betrayal. When they began recording Rumours, nobody expected it to work. The atmosphere was toxic, yet somehow that pain became fuel. Every lyric, every drum beat carried emotion. Buckingham's Go Your Own Way was aimed directly at Nicks. Christine's Don't Stop was her message to John about moving on. Even the gentle ballad Songbird was a quiet plea for peace. Mick, holding it all together, played with thunderous control. He once said he used drumming as therapy. Every hit of the snare was a release of tension. The band barely spoke off mic, but when the red recording light came on, something clicked. The result was Rumours, an album so honest, so charged with emotion, it resonated with millions. When it was released in 1977, Rumours became an instant phenomenon. It sold over 40 million copies worldwide, won the Grammy for Album of the Year. Songs like Dreams and The Chain became timeless. But the success came with a heavy price. Cocaine use was out of control. Fleetwood himself later admitted to spending millions on drugs. He called it a fog that lasted a decade. The relationships within the band became tangled beyond repair. After his divorce from Jenny, Mick began an affair with Stevie Nicks. It was passionate, chaotic, and ultimately destructive. Nicks was also involved with Dawn Henley from the Eagles at the time. Years later, she said, "It was doomed, a beautiful, crazy, terrible mistake." Even after it ended, the emotional scars lingered. Despite everything, Fleetwood kept pushing forward. He was the anchor, the one member who refused to let the band die. But fame has a way of magnifying every weakness. After Rumours, Buckingham wanted to experiment. The next album, Tusk, released in 1979, was ambitious and strange. It cost over $1 million to make a fortune back then. Mick defended it, saying it was art, not just a product. But the long sessions, the pressure, and the endless partying took their toll. By the early 1980s, the band was exhausted. Their personal lives were chaos. Fleetwood, still battling addiction, made disastrous financial choices. He bought a massive farm in Australia that nearly bankrupted him. At one point, he owed more money than he had ever earned. The next few years were a blur of tours, rehab, and new albums. In 1982, Mirage brought them back to the top of the charts. But behind the scenes, cracks were growing. Buckingham felt disconnected and wanted to leave. When he finally quit in 1987, it wasn't peaceful. At a meeting with the band, tensions exploded. He and Stevie Nicks even had a physical fight. The next day, he was gone. For Mick, it felt like déjà vu, another key member walking away. But again, he refused to let the dream end. New musicians joined, and the show went on. Still, the magic of the classic lineup couldn't be replaced. By the early 1990s, the band was fading. Albums like Behind the Mask and Time didn't make much impact. The music world had moved on, and Fleetwood Mac felt like a band out of time. On top of that, Mick's personal life remained messy. His affair with Nicks years earlier had cost him friendships, and his next marriage to Nicks's best friend, Sarah Recker, only made things worse. Nicks was devastated and even banned Sarah from the studio. The betrayal cut deep, and for years their friendship was broken. In 1997, something unexpected happened. The classic lineup, Fleetwood, McVie, Buckingham, Nicks, and John McVie, reunited for a special live recording called The Dance. It was like time had folded back on itself. The tension was still there, but so was the music. When they played The Chain, the crowd roared, and for a moment, it felt like forgiveness. The album went to #1, selling millions. But it wasn't just a reunion, it was closure. Christine McVie soon left the band, saying she wanted peace and a quiet life. For the rest, the story continued, but the golden era was behind them by the 2000s. Fleetwood had seen it all: fame, fortune, addiction, love, and loss. He had lost $60 million to bad investments and drugs. Yet somehow, he rebuilt his life. He opened a restaurant in Maui called Fleetwood's on Front Street, fulfilling a childhood dream. He released memoirs, formed new bands, and found calm in the rhythm that had guided him since he was 13. But the secrets of Fleetwood Mac, the affairs, the feuds, the unspoken regrets, still followed him like shadows. As he approached his 70s, he began to speak more openly about those days. He said that in the end, the band's chaos was both its curse and its genius. Without the pain, there might never have been Rumours. And without Rumours, there might never have been healing. Now at 78, Mick Fleetwood looks back on a life few could imagine. The drummer who once slept on a floor in Notting Hill is now a legend, not just for his music, but for his resilience. In recent years, he's become more open about the past, not to gossip, but to make peace with it. He said that keeping Fleetwood Mac alive was both his greatest achievement and his biggest burden. "I was the keeper of the dream," he once said. "Even when everyone else gave up, I couldn't." After decades of turbulence, Mick found peace in Maui, where he lived a quieter life, surrounded by family and friends. But tragedy still found him. In 2022, Christine McVie, the band's gentle soul, passed away. Her death hit him harder than he expected. "She was the glue," he said in one interview. "The person who held us together when everything else was falling apart." To honor her, he recorded a tribute album in 2024 with ukulele master Jake Shimabukuro. The album, Blues Experience, included a haunting version of McVie's Songbird. Critics called it one of the most emotional recordings of Fleetwood's career. Then came another surprise. In early 2025, after years of distance and public feuding, Lindsey Buckingham joined Mick in the studio again. The two men, once divided by decades of anger, were suddenly working side by side. They weren't just recording music, they were talking about the past, about forgiveness, and about the years lost to pride and misunderstanding. Their collaboration, set for release in late 2025, has been described as both nostalgic and raw, a fitting reflection of everything they've endured. Fleetwood's personal life, once filled with drama, has also softened. He's a proud father and grandfather, spending time between Maui and Los Angeles. He enjoys photography, art, and the simple joy of cooking for friends. The man who once played in smoky bars now prefers the sound of ocean waves over roaring crowds. Yet, when he sits behind a drum kit, the years disappear. The rhythm is still there, steady, human, eternal. Looking back, Fleetwood says he doesn't regret much. Every mistake, every heartbreak, every dollar lost taught him something. "If you take away the pain," he said in a 2024 interview, "you take away the music." He believes the true secret of Fleetwood Mac isn't fame or fortune, it's survival. Through addiction, betrayal, and loss, they kept creating. The band became a reflection of life itself, messy, beautiful, and unpredictable. When asked what he'd want to say to Stevie Nicks or Lindsey Buckingham today, he simply said, "I love them. Always have." For a man whose life was built on rhythm, forgiveness might be the final beat. He's not interested in reopening old wounds. He just wants everyone to remember why they started making music in the first place, the fires of 2023. In Maui destroyed his restaurant and nearly everything he had built there, but even then he focused on helping others. He flew back to Maui to deliver supplies and support his staff, many of whom had lost their homes. It reminded him that music and community were never separate. They both come from the same place: connection. So what secrets did Mick Fleetwood finally reveal? Not hidden scandals or new betrayals, but something deeper, that the real story of Fleetwood Mac was never just about fame. It was about people trying to love each other while the world watched. It was about finding rhythm when life felt out of tune. And it was about the strength to keep playing, even when the song seemed over. Today, when Mick speaks, he does so with humility. He often laughs about the madness of the past, but never denies it. We were a family, he says. A very strange, beautiful, broken family. Maybe that's why the music still connects, because everyone in their own way understands what it means to fall apart and keep going. As Mick Fleetwood turns 78, he's no longer chasing fame. He's chasing peace, the same quiet rhythm he found as a boy in that attic in England. His drumbeat, once the pulse of rock's wildest band, now feels like a heartbeat. Slow, steady, alive. And somewhere out there, as the sun sets over Maui, you can almost hear it, the sound of a man who has lived every note, still keeping time to the song of his life. When you look back at the long road of rock history, few names echo quite like Fleetwood Mac, decades after the band's first song hit the airwaves. Their music still sounds timeless, the harmonies still haunting, the lyrics still raw and relatable. Young fans who weren't even born when Rumours came out are now discovering it for the first time, streaming those same songs that once filled vinyl shops in 1977 for Mick Fleetwood. This revival isn't just nostalgia, it's living proof that truth in music never dies. When you play from your heart, he once said, it travels further than you ever will. What's remarkable about Mick is how much he's evolved from the wild drummer of the 1970s to the thoughtful elder statesman of rock. He still carries that tall, towering presence, 6'6", always in waistcoats and hats, but there's a gentleness to him now. Friends describe him as philosophical, even spiritual. He spends mornings meditating by the sea, reflecting on the years that flew by in a blur of sound and chaos. Yet he still talks about the band with a kind of wonder, as if it all happened to someone else. He knows he made mistakes, but he also knows he lived something extraordinary. Mick often says that Fleetwood Mac wasn't meant to last. Too many personalities, too many heartbreaks, too many secrets. But somehow, it did, and that survival, he believes, is the real miracle. Every time the band seemed ready to fall apart, something kept them together, the music itself. The rhythm, the chemistry, the strange unspoken bond between five very different people. He's compared it to a storm, destructive, beautiful, and impossible to stop. You can't control a storm, he said once. You just hold on and ride it. That ability to ride it became his guiding philosophy, not just for music, but for life. When everything else collapsed, marriages, money, fame, he turned to rhythm. Drumming became his meditation, a kind of heartbeat that reminded him who he was. During his hardest years, when he was nearly bankrupt and isolated, he would set up his kit and just play. No audience, no spotlight. Just the sound of sticks on skins, repeating endlessly until peace returned. It's my way of talking to the universe, he said in recent interviews. Fleetwood has also talked openly about forgiveness, not only toward others, but toward himself. He spent years feeling responsible for holding the band together, sometimes at the cost of his own sanity. He admits now that he often sacrificed his happiness for the sake of the group. I became the caretaker, he said. It was my job to make sure the show went on, no matter what was happening behind the curtain. That caretaker instinct, while noble, also took its toll. He became addicted to being needed, to fixing what was broken. Only later in life did he learn to let go. These days, when he speaks at events or music schools, he tells younger musicians that the hardest part of success isn't reaching the top, it's staying human once you're there. He warns them about the dangers of ego and excess. The stage can eat you alive if you let it, he says. But he also reminds them that imperfection is part of art. "We made Rumours when our lives were falling apart," told an audience in London in 2024. "That record wasn't perfect, but that's why it's real." People don't need perfection, they need honesty. Mick's sense of gratitude has deepened with age. He often talks about Peter Green, the man who started it all, with a mix of love and sorrow. When Green passed away in 2020, Mick organized a massive tribute concert at the London Palladium, featuring stars like David Gilmour, Pete Townshend, and Billy Gibbons. He said it was his way of saying thank you and goodbye to the man who gave me a life. That night, as he stood behind the drum kit once again, he said he could almost feel Peter's presence, quiet, smiling, proud. There's also a tenderness in the way Mick now talks about Stevie Nicks. Their affair in the late 1970s caused enormous pain, but time has softened the edges. He calls her his eternal sister, saying that their bond is complicated but unbreakable. Stevie, for her part, often credits Mick for being the band's emotional anchor. "He's the big tree," she once said. "We all leaned on him when the wind got too strong." A description seems fitting. No matter how many storms came, Mick stood tall, sometimes bending, never breaking. Beyond music, Fleetwood has become something of a storyteller and historian. His 2024 autobiography, Play On, The Life Behind the Beat, became a bestseller not just because of gossip, but because of its honesty. He didn't hide from the ugly parts, the drugs, the money troubles, the affairs. Instead, he wrote about them with a kind of humility that only comes from surviving them. Readers said it felt like listening to an old friend admitting the truth after a lifetime of pretending. In one of the book's most powerful lines, he wrote, "The rhythm saved me more than once. Every time I lost myself, I found myself in the music again." In many ways, Mick Fleetwood's later years have been about preservation, not of fame, but of meaning. He spends time curating old footage of the band, archiving tapes, and working on projects that keep their legacy alive. He knows there may never be another full reunion, especially after Christine's death, but he doesn't see that as a tragedy. "We've already given the world what we were meant to give," he said. "The rest is grace." That sense of acceptance, of being at peace with the past, defines him now more than anything else. Still, he hasn't stopped dreaming. He's talked about producing a documentary that focuses on the emotional side of Fleetwood Mac's journey, not the headlines, but the human cost of creation. He wants future generations to understand that great art often comes from broken places. "If our story teaches anything," he said, "it's that beauty and chaos often share the same stage." Today, when people see Mick Fleetwood, they see more than a drummer. They see a survivor, someone who has lived through nearly every extreme life can offer and still kept his sense of wonder. He's a living reminder that rhythm isn't just about keeping time. It's about moving through it. Every beat, every pause, every silence, they all matter. As he moves toward his 8th decade, Mick says he feels like he's finally learned to listen, not just to music, but to life itself. He listens to the wind in the palms outside his Maui home, to the laughter of his grandchildren, to the distant crash of waves. He says those sounds have rhythm too if you listen closely. "It's all music," he smiles. "It always was." So when the history of Fleetwood Mac is told, the scandals, the heartbreaks, the triumphs, remember the man behind the drums. The tall, wild, gentle giant who never stopped believing in rhythm. The one who turned pain into poetry, chaos into chords, and secrets into songs. Mick Fleetwood's legacy isn't just in the records or the fame. It's in the simple truth that life, like music, is meant to be felt every beat of it. Every song tells a story. But few stories in rock history are as filled with passion, pain, survival as the story of Fleetwood Mac, a band that rose from the smoky clubs of London to the biggest stages in the world. Their songs made millions of people sing, cry, and dream. Yet behind the music were real people, broken hearts, lost friendships, and choices that changed lives forever. At the center of it all stood one man, Mick Fleetwood. Tall, quiet, and steady like a lighthouse in a storm, Mick wasn't just the band's drummer, he was its heartbeat. For nearly 60 years, he kept the rhythm going while everything around him fell apart. Bandmates came and went, Love turned to betrayal, and money came and disappeared just as fast. Right through it all, Mick held the band together with nothing but his stubborn hope and the beat of his drums. In 2025, Mick Fleetwood turned 78 years old. For the first time, he began to talk openly about the secrets that shaped his life, the wild days of fame, the hidden pain behind the success, and the personal mistakes that almost destroyed him. After decades of silence, he's finally ready to tell the truth, not just about himself, but about the people who built Fleetwood Mac with him. People like Stevie Nicks, whose haunting voice defined a generation, and Lindsey Buckingham, whose genius and temper turned music into both art and war. People like Christine McVie, whose soft melodies balanced all the chaos. And John McVie, the quiet bassist, whose name became part of rock history. This isn't just the story of a band. It's the story of how fame can lift you up and tear you apart. It's about love that turned into betrayal, about friends who became strangers, about how one man found redemption through rhythm. Behind the gold records and Grammy Awards, there were nights of loneliness, addiction, and heartbreak. There were choices that could never be undone, but there was also resilience, the courage to rebuild, to forgive, and to keep playing, no matter how hard life hit back. Mick Fleetwood's journey is a reminder that even the brightest stars carry shadows, that every hit song comes with a cost, and that the real story of Fleetwood Mac isn't just about music, it's about survival, truth, and the strange, beautiful mess of being human. So before we dive into the story, before the fame, before rumors, before the scandals, let's go back to where it all began. A restless boy in post-war England, chasing a sound that would one day change the world.